was the deadline that President Biden announced for withdrawing all troops from Afghanistan. Many questioned his strategy and wondered would he stick to it after three deadly attacks at the airport claimed the lives of 13 U.S. service members and left more than 100 Afghans dead. This morning, we check in with an update from General Kenneth McKenzie, the commander of U.S. Central Command.
I'm here to announce the completion of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the end of the military mission to evacuate American citizens, third country nationals, and vulnerable Afghans. The last C-17 lifted off from Hamid Karzai International Airport on August 30th, this afternoon, at 3:29 p.m. East Coast time. Look, there's a lot of heartbreak associated with this departure. We did not get everybody out that we wanted to get out. But I think if we'd stayed another 10 days, Louis, we wouldn't have gotten everybody out that we wanted to get out. And there still would have been people who would have been disappointed with that. But I want to emphasize again that simply because we have left, that doesn't mean the opportunities for both Americans that are in Afghanistan that want to leave and Afghans who want to leave, they will not be denied that opportunity. I think our Department of State is going to work that very hard in the days and weeks ahead.
Can you assure the American public that every single U.S. service member is now out of Afghanistan?
Every single U.S. service member is now out of Afghanistan. I can say that with 100% certainty.
So there it is, the update right from General Commander Kenneth McKenzie. You know, all of the U.S. troops are out of Afghanistan now, Ben, and this marks the end of the longest war. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about this coming to an end?
You know, this is a significant culmination of a period in American history where we have two generations: the generation that was alive on 9/11, the generation that was born that day and going forward, that we all intersected into the same war. Children born on 9/11 served in this war. It was time. But we do also have to consider the opposite side of this. While I do look at what Joe Biden has done, and I look at it favorably, because it was what had to be done, there is the flip side of it, and that is the concern for the lives of all of the people who did not get out. And as the general was speaking there, categorizing it as a disappointment, the fact is that disappointment is coupled with tragedy and trauma for families who missed the flight. And so I'm not so readily to dismiss it as a disappointment so much as the stories and lives of all the people who are now trapped behind those lines.
You know, I was reading the stories from some of the people who did leave, and there was a women's rights activist who said that in order to get to the airport, she walked through the sewer pipe for miles. And another story that you heard, a father explaining to his son that the gunfire was a celebration to try to ease his child from worry or concern about his own safety. And so when you read those stories, and then I juxtapose that with seeing people gather in front of the White House when I was in DC this weekend and forming their own protests to protect Afghans, because we already have a population of Afghans in our nation. And these are their brothers, their sisters, their mothers, their cousins, their uncles, their friends that now they have to worry about. And the other side of that is, what is the Taliban's plan going forward? I know you've spoken extensively about them being acknowledged as the official government entity. What is their plan with governing this nation going forward?
Well, then now that's a complicated question and a great question, because what is the plan of any governing authority in a region? It is to have the monopoly on violence within that region. And that's a definition from Max Weber, who put it as such. It is the legitimate monopoly on violence. And so in the United States, we see that as the police state. And that's what Black people intersect with every single day. In Afghanistan, under the rule of the Taliban, you can be assured that they are going to carry out a far right wing, theocratic style government that aligns with the doctrine of their interpretation of Islam, which is quite antithetical to so many Muslims across the globe. But that is a conversation for their community to have. But as it pertains to what they plan to do, they plan to be a legitimately recognized state on the international stage, the legitimate regime there. But that does not mean that they are not going to wield their power as a bludgeoning tool over the people over whom they rule.
Is that is it safe? You know, when you talk about the type of violence and the level of violence and the consistent use of violence that we've seen from the Taliban, you know, that I think for me that is the concern. I get it in saying that they're going to have the monopoly on the use
Mm-hmm.
of violence, but what we've seen from them historically is that they use violence often.
Yeah, yeah. And this is where this is, I mean, this is the crux of the situation, right? And this is where we can see multiple sides to the argument. And this, and while Brother Mac is not here, his argument is still resounding very loudly. You have to take in consideration the people who are going to be the receiving end of that monopoly on violence that is now being wielded by the Taliban. And in so much as they subscribe to a fundamentalist interpretation of Islam, that just like the fundamentalist interpretation of Christianity is oppressive to women. Because let's be sure, we are just one Supreme Court decision away from losing a woman's right to choose in this country. And while some people may not consider that as violence, it is a step towards violence that is the same ideology. That far right wing fundamentalist interpretation of any religion is a threat to humanity. So
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
catch 22.
Before we switch gears here, we're anticipating that President Biden will make a statement addressing the withdrawal from Afghanistan. What do you think he's going to touch on?
He's going to try to validate his strategy. But one thing about Joe Biden, he is a curmudgeonly old guy, and he's not going to apologize for any of this. And I don't think he should in this case, because this is the best that you can make out of a soup sandwich that was the entire war on terror. We had no right to be there as an occupying force for 20 years, no more than we have the right to be an occupying force in Korea, not North Korea, but in Korea in general, and the occupying force across the globe in so many places for the last decades. Right. The United States has made a soup sandwich on the international stage, and Joe Biden got stuck with the hot potato. I do not believe he's going to apologize, nor do I think he should.
Well, they are saying that it's caused his ratings to go down. People calling it a failure. People saying that they don't believe in his leadership after this exit strategy. But I lean more on the side of, yeah, how did people expect it to go?
Right.
And how much longer did people expect us to stay?
That's
I
right.
think the thing that concerns me is, now what is the strategy moving forward? Do do the folks with the military intelligence feel that those airstrikes got the folks who were responsible for the explosions at the airport that ultimately took the life of 13 US service members? My question, and I don't know if he's going to address this, but what I want to hear from him today is, do they plan to continue using force in Afghanistan
Mm-hmm.
because of those 3 attacks?
Vis-a-vis
Or did they
drones.
get who they were looking for in the airstrike?
That's right. Right. And while the United States may not have troops on the ground, one thing we have cavalierly wielded across the international stage is our ability to access any region through drone strikes. So the real question is, are we going to continue drone strikes in Afghanistan? And I'm quite sure that might not be a question is going to be willing to answer today. But it would
Yeah,
be a
well,
great question from
I
a
mean,
journalist.
but he threw that information out so carelessly, you know, in response to the first explosions. He was very candid that we are not going to forgive
Right.
and that we will get whoever is
Right.
responsible,
Right.
which I think was, I guess, for that felt like it was more for the American people to
Oh yeah.
have confidence in him than it was
Uh,
actually for um, military strategy. Because why would you ever want your opponent to know what you're up to?
at the risk of being called a neoliberal, I'm reminded of a scene from The American President, Michael Douglas, and he is faced with the decision, a fictional decision of whether or not he should strike a country. The military industrial complex in that movie demanded a certain level of language and bellicosity, and we see that is real. That is not life imitate, that is not art imitating life. That is, well, you got it. I have to flip and reverse it. That is the reality of our military industrial complex. It is present in reality right there in Joe Biden's ear. He is having to grapple with the reality again that we have to get out of there. But there is a infrastructure around Joe Biden that is demanding blood because they profit off of it. And so in their closing salvo, they had a drone strike. And whether or not there's a justification of it, in that movie, Michael Douglas said that at a certain point, we have to not appear strong. We have to be strong. And sometimes being strong means we can take it on the chin and walk away because striking at the last hour is sufficient to create more problems in the future. So I agree with you, Georgia. As convoluted as long as it took for me to get that point out, the fact is that Joe Biden could have shown a new level of strength that is required for leadership in this international stage. And that is the ability to not strike back, because of course we have the capacity to go in there and obliterate them. But do we have to demonstrate that at every opportunity?
And at the cost of 7 children who were killed in that airstrike.
That's right. That's right.
I do want to acknowledge the troops who have been fighting for our country over the last 20 years, the veterans, those who have served to protect us. This conversation has largely become political and about Biden and about the Taliban. But American troops have sacrificed time with their families, time away from home, and their lives to keep us safe. And so I want to center them this morning and just, if you have fought in a war, or if you spent any time there, we appreciate you. Know that.
Yeah.
Turning now, a Pennsylvania congressional candidate, Teddy Daniels, has a lot to say about the pandemic, and he's on the side that is fueling a lot of the, I'll say, controversy. Take a listen.
This is still America, Tucker. Okay, if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask.
Yeah.
If you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. That's what makes this country great. With the vaccines, if you've had that conversation with your doctor and you feel a vaccine is the best route for you, go for it. Cool. But for those that don't, that's also cool. Let people live their lives.
Wait, but shouldn't we kill people who don't get the vaccine?
Well, that's what the left wants to do.
Yeah, I've noticed.
That's what they want to do. I see a bunch of states right now, they're looking, New York City just did it, the vaccine passport. They're going to start enacting it if you want to go to restaurants. Who the hell does this? Seriously.
I guess if you allow people totally unlimited power and no one ever pushes back, I haven't seen a Republican in Congress fight against this. The governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, was supposed to be the great conservative hope. She said yesterday, well, I'm not going to sign a bill that prevents vaccine mandates because vaccines are good.
I think.
And you're like, well, I thought, wait a second, Kristi Noem, what about the freedom you said you were going to defend?
Yeah.
Nope.
The government's response when this whole pandemic started should have been this. Now, you got to remember, I come from the communist state of Pennsylvania to where they divided people from essential and non-essential employees.
Very well.
Okay? And this business can stay open, but this one has to close.
Right.
Do you know how many people lost their businesses, Tucker?
So maybe controversy wasn't the correct choice of word. Maybe propaganda
Mm,
would serve him better.
mm.
But we're seeing this continued. I don't know if you saw the air quotes around
That's it.
pandemic,
That's right.
but you've been sharing this, Ben. I've been seeing this in the afternoons. You're posting about radio personalities and pastors who were anti-vaccine, anti-mask, who have now died to COVID.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so to see this rhetoric, to see this propaganda, not just on YouTube, but this is on Tucker Carlson's show.
That's right. That's right. Tucker Carlson has millions of viewers every single day. And I would argue, Georgia, that controversial should be the word, right? The way we should look at this in society is controversial, but we don't because we have become accustomed to the propaganda to the extent that one of the most popular hosts in the country, Tucker Carlson, is able to peddle conspiracy theories as along with snake oil, the ivermectin. He's a part of that narrative, and now they're promoting this idea that is so. But I want to hold the pin there. The flip side of this is I never expected them to believe their own lies, and I think that's what you're getting to, because you have conservative radio hosts and pastors and politicians who are getting sick with COVID-19 and actually dying from it. And so my thing is, it's one thing for this to be propaganda, but it should not only be controversial, but I think it should be such an anathema to us that we see this as people who have dispensed with their sense of survival. They are killing themselves because of their politics.
Oh yeah, and this guy, he's running for office. Teddy Daniels, he's a congressional candidate, and what is dangerous is the fact that he's putting this out there. If he gets support and he gets in, this is another vote.
That's right.
This is another
That's right.
vote that impacts the lives of those who live in Pennsylvania.
That's right.
This is another political force that impacts the national stage as
Yeah.
well. He also served, and thanks to David for pointing this out, served the Trump campaign as the Northeast U.S. Director of Vets for Trump.
Mm, and that makes
So
sense.
he's well versed, and he has support, not just in his district, but because of that connection with Trump, he has a lot of national affiliations as well.
Yeah.
So he had his sphere of influence is vast, and here you have this man putting air quotes on a pandemic that has killed how many people nationally
Getting
and
close to seven.
internationally?
We're
And
coming.
you wanna
Well,
put
oh
air
my
quotes
goodness.
around that?
Internationally. Sister Ford, when you said internationally, it reminded me of what's happening even in India, right? There are reactionaries all across the globe who have seized power in these countries. And that's what this guy is. He's looking to get another piece, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, of the power structure that is the American empire. And we should be terrified that this is the regime of ignorance that has seized power in the form of the right-wing conservative movement that was championed and heralded by Donald Trump. He is not the creator of that movement, and that movement has gotten so big that it has now eaten him. It is out of control, and the pathway to power and economic privilege for conservatives now is to ignore the reality of a pandemic that has killed nearly 700,000 people in America alone.
And what frustrates me is because then you juxtapose that with candidates like Nina Turner,
Mm,
who were honestly running on truth and
mm,
were running to disrupt change, and how in our community, that can be seen as I don't know, but she's running on truth, and here you
mm.
have someone who is simply just running on propaganda, and the thought that he will actually be elected. He
Yeah,
could actually be elected. It disheartens me because
yeah.
the integrity that's required to be a politician is in this nation is little to none. You don't
Mm,
Integrity is not a requirement,
mm. And
and
it's
I
a
wish
liability.
more people in our community would not feel like they are not qualified. I hear that a lot. People, oh, or I have this in my background, or I don't have the experience. Listen, we have people, Republican hopefuls, who are running on lies and winning.
Mm, mm. That is the pathway to victory for them. And it has led to many of them not being able to distinguish from the reality that is an objective truth and the reality that they have crafted in their minds that is built on the propaganda that they have gotten over the last 20 years from outlets like Fox News, who is now more than happy to put somewhere to the tune of $8 million a year in the hands of Tucker Carlson because he is a master propagandist. But the problem is that because they no longer can distinguish between their own propaganda and the truth, they're running up against the freight train that is COVID-19. And so while I do hope that they are all vaccinated because them participating in that community-wide activity helps us all, the truth is some of them are dying. And death is pretty permanent. Your political position should be flexible enough to accommodate life, especially from a party that considers itself to be pro-life.
And Tucker Carlson is not the only one who's using his platform. I know we've spoken about him a lot. And if you're not a right winger, you might not even know that some of these shows exist. I want to play a clip really quick from True News. This is another program that is highlighting this type of propaganda.
Think that in America, we're eventually going to face vaccination camps, quarantine camps, punishment for people who choose not to be vaccinated or to vaccinate their children? Do you think parents are going to lose their children? They're going to have them taken away because they're not deemed fit to be parents because they choose not to put an experimental jab in their children?
Yeah, I think we could see that. And you're right. Australia does appear to be a canary in the coal mine. And right, a 3-month time lag sounds about right. Once the fall, what used to be the fall flu season hits, we're going to have mass hysteria. And I know that a lot of parents have already planned for this. They made difficult decisions with their children not to send them back to the public schools here, which are essentially indoctrination and will be quarantine camps themselves. The Scarlet Letter is now a U for young kids, whether they're on K through 12 campuses or college campuses or at the service academies. We essentially have de facto quarantine vaccination camps already.
And so this is stemming from a situation where a parent did lose their rights in Chicago. Take a look at this clip.
It may be a first of its kind case. A Cook County judge here at the Daly Center has stripped a Chicago mom of her parenting rights because she's refused to get the COVID vaccine.
And he is a very sweet boy. He's my whole world.
You miss him?
I miss him more than anything.
Rebecca Furlett has been divorced for 7 years and shares custody of her 11-year-old son with her ex-husband. What had been a 50-50 split in parenting time. But on August 10th, in an unrelated child support hearing, Cook County Judge James Shapiro asked Furlett whether she'd been vaccinated. When she told the judge no because she's had bad reactions to vaccines in the past, Judge Shapiro stripped Furlett of all of her parenting time until she agrees to get vaccinated.
I think that it's wrong. I think that it's dividing families, and I think that it's not in my son's best interest to be away from his mother.
Furlett is now asking the appellate court to stay the judge's order. Her attorney saying the judge has overstepped his authority.
And you have to understand the fact.
I wonder if the judge is related to Ben Shapiro. Just
well, but here's a situation that I see in this one, Georgia. This scenario is. There are a group of parents in this country that are asking for permission to be able to put their children's life at risk of dying from COVID-19, particularly the Delta variant, because that has mutated from what was something that originally was not a significant threat as far as percentages to children. The Delta variant is killing children. And these people are asking for permission because they are their parents to put their children in harm's way. I just need us to observe the absurdity of the moment that we're living in And I do believe that if you are I'm going to stop there. I can't.
Well, what are your thoughts about specifically this mother losing her rights?
If
Do you
she
think it
was
should
going
go that
to,
far? Should there be that much regulation on vaccines?
death is pretty permanent. And as this continues to mutate, it is becoming more and more clear that because of the ignorance of America and the ignorance of that right-wing reactionary movement that is global, we are going to continue to see variants of COVID-19 morph until the point where we all are going to have to go back into full quarantine, and we would have lost at least 1 million people in this country. If parents are so committed to their desire to not get vaccinated, fine. But do you have the right to put your children's life at risk? Absolutely not.
And so when you looked at that first clip from True News, we saw this exaggeration from a story like this, right? Where it starts out where this parent is losing visitation rights, and then it gets blown up into full blown concentration camps. Now,
That's
there
right.
are no reports of that at this time. And I don't see regulation developing to that level. But Ben, to your point, this is a matter of life and death,
It is.
especially for children now. And so yeah, I mean, but I will say this. I do think if we're moving in the direction of taking parents their visitation rights away, I do think that we should be moving in the direction of online school again.
Yeah.
To me, that feels very contradictory that you'll be hurting children in these
Yes.
classrooms
Oh, yes.
without having to
Yeah.
wear masks. In some instances, there's a ban on mask mandates. And then the other piece is, that there is not vaccination cards required to go into
Mm.
the schools in some cases. So if we're moving in the direction of holding the parents that responsible, I think we should also be protecting our children and just
Absolutely.
allowing them to do distance learning again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I could not agree more. And herein lies the complicity of the Democratic leadership in the form of Joe Biden. As much as I may agree with the decision to pull out of Afghanistan because of my principled anti-war stance, I also see that there are so many Democratic leaders who have participated in this notion that we should get back to normal by sending our precious children into petri dishes that are public schools. There is no
Absolutely.
part of this that we should be looking at and considering sending our children back into this pandemic. But because we are here to serve the power structure, everyone is saying send our kids back to school. I couldn't agree with you more, Georgia.
Well, it is that time, Ben. I know that you have lots planned for this morning.
Yeah. So coming up in the next block, Stacy Mitchell, co-director at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and she is the author of The Big Box Swindle. We're going to dig into all of those empty buildings that you see in your community, all those big box